It started with a single late-night post that sent shockwaves through the halls of Congress, a declaration that many saw coming but few were prepared to handle. The president has officially invoked emergency powers to bypass the traditional legislative process, signaling a massive shift in how the United States government functions in 2026. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe. My name is George Will, and this is Policy and Profit. The tension in Washington has reached a fever pitch as the administration moves to consolidate authority over the southern border and the national economy. This isn't just a political disagreement, it's a fundamental clash over the limits of executive power. As of early February 2026, the White House has declared a national emergency, citing a catastrophic immigration crisis and the need for immediate unilateral action to finish the border wall and deploy military personnel on domestic soil. While the president's base is energized, a significant and unexpected group is starting to push back: his own party. For years, the Republican Party has been seen as a monolith of support for the current administration, but this latest move has fractured that unity. High-profile GOP senators are publicly questioning whether this bypass of Congress sets a dangerous precedent that could one day be used against them. We are witnessing a high-stakes constitutional showdown that could redefine the balance of power for generations. The air in the Capitol is thick with the scent of rebellion, as even the most loyal allies are forced to choose between party loyalty and the constitutional check on executive overreach. This emergency declaration isn't just about the border. It's being used as a lever to implement sweeping economic changes, including a series of aggressive tariffs that have already begun to impact American households. Experts suggest that the weighted average tariff rate has surged to levels not seen since the aftermath of World War II, creating an economic environment that is both volatile and unpredictable. The president is essentially ruling by decree, using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to reshape global trade without a single vote from the House or Senate.
Behind closed doors, the Make Elections Great Again Act is being fast-tracked, with the administration using these emergency authorities to push for immediate changes to voting laws ahead of the 2026 midterms. The pushback from Republicans isn't just about the policy, it's about the method. Some are calling it a flattening of federalism, arguing that the states are being stripped of their traditional rights to manage their own affairs. As the partial government shutdown drags on, the stakes couldn't be higher. We are looking at a shattered legislative landscape where the old rules of engagement no longer apply, and the line between a republic and a centralized authority is becoming increasingly blurred. To understand where we are going, we have to look at how we got here. This isn't the first time an American president has tested the elastic limits of the Constitution, but the scale of what's happening in 2026 is unprecedented. For decades, the legal architecture of the United States has been quietly accumulating a shadow toolbox of authorities that most citizens never knew existed. It all traces back to the 1970s, an era defined by post-Watergate anxiety when Congress tried, and largely failed, to put a leash on the executive branch. In 1976, Congress passed the National Emergencies Act, intending to provide a clear framework for how a president could act in a true crisis. The irony is that instead of restricting power, it created a roadmap for its expansion. Once a president signs that piece of paper, over 130 specialized statutory powers suddenly unlock, granting the White House the ability to seize control of industrial production, restrict travel, and even divert billions of dollars from the military budget without a single new vote from lawmakers. We saw the first major crack in this system back in 2019, but what we are witnessing today is the total collapse of that restraint. The current administration is leaning heavily on a piece of legislation called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA. Originally designed to freeze the assets of foreign dictators and terrorists, it is now being used as a blunt instrument to reshape the domestic American economy. By declaring that foreign trade imbalances constitute a national emergency, the president has effectively seized the power to tax and regulate at will. This is a legal loophole of oceanic proportions, allowing for the bypass of the House Ways and Means Committee, which is constitutionally mandated to oversee all revenue-raising measures. Historically, Republicans have been the party of small government and strict constructionism, which is why the current internal rebellion is so significant. They remember that when one side expands the reach of the Oval Office, the other side eventually gets to sit in the chair. There is a deep-seated fear among GOP veterans that by supporting these emergency powers now, they are handing a loaded gun to any future administration they might oppose. They are looking back at the 1930s when the executive branch expanded during the Great Depression and realizing that once these powers are seized, they are almost never voluntarily surrendered. The legal precedent being set right now is creating a world where emergency is no longer a temporary state of affairs, but a permanent method of governance. In the past, emergencies lasted weeks or months. Today, some national emergencies declared in the 1970s are still technically active. This is the background noise of the current crisis, a slow, 50-year drift toward a system where the president acts and Congress merely reacts. The pushback we're seeing from the Republican ranks isn't just a political spat. It's a desperate, last-minute attempt to prevent the emergency from becoming the new normal. While the public sees the headlines, it is the quiet, behind-the-scenes maneuvers that truly reveal the gravity of this situation. Inside the West Wing, a strategy referred to by some as the administrative presidency on steroids is in full swing. This isn't just about the border. It's a systematic dismantling of the traditional bureaucracy. We've learned that, alongside the emergency declaration, the administration has moved to reclassify thousands of civil service roles as political appointments, effectively ensuring that there is no one left in the middle to say no. Perhaps the most shocking revelation is the existence of a shadow budget being funneled through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. While Congress debates funding for the Department of Homeland Security, this specific piece of legislation has already quietly secured long-term funding for ICE and border operations, making them immune to the government shutdowns that are currently paralyzing other agencies like FEMA and the Coast Guard. This means that while the rest of the government might grind to a halt, the president's signature enforcement arm continues to operate at full capacity, completely decoupled from congressional oversight. Adding to the tension is the recent Minnesota incident, a dark turning point that has left the GOP reeling. During a federal immigration sweep in Minneapolis, 2 U.S. citizens were shot and killed by federal agents, an event that was captured in startling videos and has since gone viral. This tragedy has done what years of political debate couldn't. It has forced loyal Republicans like Senator Rand Paul to break ranks. Paul has publicly warned that the country is now being run by emergency, and he isn't alone. The administration's use of the FBI has also taken a controversial turn. Just days ago, federal agents served a search warrant at an election headquarters in Georgia, seeking ballots from the 2020 election. Critics are calling this a campaign of retribution, an attempt to use the weight of the federal government to settle old scores under the guise of national security. Even as the 2026 midterms approach, the president is doubling down on his claims that previous elections were rigged, using his emergency powers to try and rewrite state election laws from the Oval Office. Behind the curtain, the internal friction is becoming a wildfire. House Speaker Mike Johnson is currently caught in a vice, trying to prevent a total government collapse while managing a far-right faction that is demanding even more aggressive use of these emergency powers. The Make Elections Great Again Act is the current battlefield, with provisions that would immediately ban popular voting methods like mail-in ballots across the country. The question everyone in D.C. is asking is no longer if the president will use these powers, but how far he will go before his own party finally snaps. The financial and emotional toll of this emergency declaration is beginning to ripple through the American heartland, moving far beyond the abstract debates of constitutional law. For the average family, the impact isn't felt in a courtroom, but at the grocery store and the gas pump. Because the president has used emergency authorities to impose massive tariffs, the cost of imported goods, from essential electronics to basic building materials, has skyrocketed overnight. This is effectively a hidden tax on the middle class, one that was never debated in a public hearing or voted on by an elected representative. The dramatic impact is perhaps most visible in the agricultural sector. As trading partners retaliate against these emergency tariffs, American farmers are finding their markets closed off, leading to a surplus of crops that they cannot sell and a plummeting of land values. We are hearing reports of multi-generational farms facing foreclosure because the global trade war has turned their life's work into a liability. The emotional weight of this is staggering. These are the very people who were promised protection and prosperity, now finding themselves at the center of a collateral damage zone created by executive decree. Meanwhile, the deployment of military assets to the domestic border has created a surreal and tense environment in border towns. Local economies that once thrived on cross-border commerce are now ghost towns, partitioned by steel and patrolled by personnel in combat gear. Families that have lived on both sides of the line for decades are being torn apart by a zero-tolerance enforcement policy that leaves no room for nuance. The psychological strain on these communities is palpable. There is a sense of being under siege, not by a foreign enemy, but by a policy that treats their backyard like a militarized battleground. The financial instability has also hit the stock market, where the emergency designation has created a climate of extreme volatility. Investors hate uncertainty, and the realization that a single pen stroke can redirect billions of dollars or shut down trade with a major partner has sent the markets into a tailspin. Pension funds and 401ks are feeling the burn as the Trump trade shifts from a promise of deregulation to a reality of unpredictable interventionism. People nearing retirement are watching their savings fluctuate wildly, wondering if the stability of the American economy has been sacrificed for a political point. Adding to this emotional powder keg is the state of federal employees. With the government shutdown lingering like a dark cloud, hundreds of thousands of workers, including TSA agents and forest rangers, are working without pay or being furloughed. These aren't just statistics. These are parents wondering how they will pay rent or buy medicine. The president's insistence that this is a price worth paying for national security rings hollow to a family whose electricity is about to be cut off. The divide between the rhetoric in Washington and the reality on Main Street has never been wider, and as the financial pressure builds, the public's patience is reaching its breaking point. As the emergency powers take hold, we are seeing the emergence of a high-stakes war of the branches, and for the first time in this administration, the calls are coming from inside the House. The conflict has escalated beyond mere disagreement into a full-blown constitutional crisis. Republican heavyweights, traditionally the president's strongest firewall, are beginning to break ranks, fearing that the emergency label is being used as a perpetual bypass for the rule of law. The pushback isn't coming from the usual suspects. It's coming from constitutional conservatives who worry that the executive branch is absorbing the powers of the purse and the power to legislate, powers that the Founding Fathers explicitly gave to Congress. The escalation hit a fever pitch when the president threatened to impose a staggering 100% tariff on Canada, using emergency economic authorities to bypass trade treaties. This wasn't just a threat. It was a signal that no ally or economic norm is safe from the unilateral reach of the Oval Office. In response, a bipartisan coalition in the Senate has moved to invoke the National Emergencies Act's termination clause, a move that would force a vote to end the declaration. This has created a shattered legislative landscape where Senate Majority Leader John Thune and other GOP leaders are caught between a president who demands absolute loyalty and a growing faction of their own members who believe the party is helping build a monarchy by another name. Adding fuel to the fire is the legal battle over the Federal Reserve. The administration's push to install a political ally at the head of the nation's central bank has led to a standoff with the Senate Banking Committee. Senator Tom Tillis has openly vowed to block the nomination, arguing that the independence of the Fed is non-negotiable. This isn't just a personnel dispute, it's a fight for the steering wheel of the global economy. If the president can use emergency powers to dictate interest rates and monetary policy, the very foundation of American capitalism could be permanently altered. We are witnessing an unprecedented fracturing of the conservative coalition as the pro-business wing of the party realizes that the emergency is starting to cost them more than they ever anticipated. The conflict has also spilled into the streets of major American cities. The administration's attempt to integrate military personnel into routine domestic policing, a move initially halted by lower courts, has been revived under the new emergency orders. Governors from both sides of the aisle are now challenging the president's authority to deploy the National Guard without their consent. The tension reached a breaking point in Chicago and Portland, where the threat of federal takeovers has led to a standoff between state police and federal agents. This federalism fatigue is pushing even red state governors to wonder if they are still the masters of their own territory. As the 2026 midterms loom, the president has doubled down, framing the internal GOP pushback as a betrayal by the establishment. He is using his platform to primary those who oppose him, turning the emergency declaration into a litmus test for the entire party. The escalation has reached a point where there is no middle ground left. It is a zero-sum game. Either the president successfully redefines the limits of executive power, or the Republican Party breaks under the strain of its own internal contradictions. The consequences of this escalation will determine not just the winner of the next election, but whether the American system of checks and balances can survive a permanent state of emergency. As the dust settles on the immediate declaration, the question shifting from, "Can he do this?" to "What happens now?" is creating a palpable sense of dread across the country. We are standing at a crossroads where the very mechanisms of American democracy are being tested to their absolute limit. The consequences of these emergency powers are no longer theoretical. They are manifesting in the streets of Minneapolis, the boardrooms of Wall Street, and the checkout lines of every American supermarket. The constitutional tightrope the administration is walking has never been thinner, and the wind is picking up. In the coming weeks, the battleground will move from the Oval Office to the Supreme Court. Legal experts expect a flurry of emergency injunctions as states and private corporations alike sue to block the unilateral tariffs and the domestic use of military personnel. However, with a judiciary that has been significantly reshaped over the last decade, the outcome is anything but certain. We could see a ruling that either reaffirms the separation of powers or, conversely, provides a permanent legal shield for executive overreach. This isn't just a court case. It's a verdict on the future of the American Republic. The Republican pushback we've seen is a signal that the political landscape has fundamentally shifted. For the first time, the loyalty at all costs mantra is being challenged by a Constitution at all costs defense. If leaders like Rand Paul and John Thune continue to resist, we could see a total realignment of the party before the 2026 midterms. This internal civil war within the GOP is the greatest threat to the administration's agenda, and how the president responds to this betrayal will determine if the government can function at all or if it will remain in a state of perpetual paralyzed emergency. What do you think about this shift in power? Is a national emergency a necessary tool for a modern president, or is it a dangerous loophole that needs to be closed for good? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This is a conversation that affects all of us. If you found this deep dive helpful, please hit that like button and share this video. It helps us keep bringing you the stories that the mainstream media often overlooks. We will be following this story closely as the legal challenges move forward and the 2026 midterm season begins to heat up. Make sure your notifications are turned on so you don't miss our next update on this developing crisis. Thank you for watching and stay vigilant.